I'm Llewellyn King, host of MECFS Alert, reporting from Incline Village, Nevada. That is the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe. And it is also the home of the Cimarron Research Organization, which supports Dr. Daniel Peterson, a legendary name in the treatment and research on chronic fatigue syndrome. I am joined now by Staci Stevens, who is an exercise physiologist, an unlikely association with chronic fatigue syndrome, where so many patients are outraged when doctors prescribe exercise, and where one young man, I believe, or I have been told, really probably hastened his own death with trying to exercise himself out of chronic fatigue syndrome. So where do you fit in? Or where does your science fit in?
Well, I think the hallmark syndrome of chronic fatigue syndrome is exercise intolerance. So studying it and understanding it and the consequences of post-exertional malaise is essential to understanding what's going on in the illness.
I'm told it is one of the only reliable markers for chronic fatigue syndrome.
Well, that has yet to be seen. It is a very objective marker, and the way that we employ testing is a 2-day test paradigm, and the second-day test allows us to objectively measure those symptoms of post-exertional malaise that very few people actually believe exists. And
how do you measure those?
We do cardiopulmonary exercise testing, which is a standard stress test. It's used widely in medicine and athletics. So it's a standard cardiac stress test with the addition of a mask to measure the oxygen that's used and carbon dioxide that's produced.
And what are you looking for in a somebody who has CFS as opposed to somebody who does not? What is the differentiation? What is the reading that tells you the probability that CFS is the culprit?
Well, the measurement of post-exertional malaise is first to create a standardized stressor. They use this test in heart failure patients routinely. And there are stratifications for impairment, from no impairment to severe impairment in heart disease and lung disease patients. So what we do in CFS is provide that same stressor, which is 8 minutes on an exercise bicycle. It's only hard for about 2 or 3 minutes toward the end of the test, and we're measuring multiple systems: the cardiac system, the pulmonary system, and the metabolic system. What's unique to CFS is the second day, they should be able to come back and do the exact same thing. The unique part is that unlike heart disease patients, CFS patients can't reproduce the results. And so we're showing this high day-to-day variability. Despite good effort, they have lower numbers.
But CFS patients often trace the outbreak of their disease, the moment of inception, to exercise followed by collapse. Often rigorous exercise followed by collapse. What is this going to do to them? Are they going to collapse?
Often. It certainly will. We tell patients in advance that this will likely precipitate symptoms. In fact, that's the reason for doing the test. Most of our patients at the moment are coming for disability evaluations, and there is no objective evidence to provide them with their disability benefits. And so they're getting denied. In fact, before we started our clinic at the University of the Pacific, patients were largely being denied, and there was no place that they could go.
I have a lot of correspondence from denied patients because they cannot prove that they have this disease, so that their suffering is compounded by the fact they cannot get money they're entitled to.
The stories are horrific, and it breaks my heart. And so unfortunately we have to do a degree of harm in order to measure their functional status to objectively sustain their claims that they cannot
Is the Social Security Administration accepting your findings?
It is.
And so that's a huge step forward.
Yes, both Social
Except
Security.
people have to go through the pain of collapse.
Correct. And not all of them collapse completely. So our research is focused on the symptom of post-exertional malaise and the functional status of patients. The good news is, as a result of the testing, just like with a healthy individual or with athletes, we can tell patients how to function better because we measure their anaerobic threshold. And you can sustain work under your anaerobic threshold, but exceed it, and fatigue and pain start to set in, and you have to stop activity.
This is fascinating, but what happens to a patient who's not close to your university in California or close to this institution in Nevada, supposing they're in Tennessee or West Virginia or anywhere else?
There is a university, Ithaca College is currently doing testing and has adopted our protocol. There are other places around the country and around the world that are currently doing this. There's no reason that any hospital or any exercise science department can't do this testing.
To what extent does the medical profession overrate the value of exercise in human well-being?
Oh, I think it's tremendously overrated.
But very important.
Extraordinarily important.
So this is a bit of a divergence, but what would be a normal life? How much exercise would you recommend?
For a healthy individual, the American College of Sports Medicine recommends a minimum of 3 days a week of 20 minutes of cardiovascular exercise, supplementing that with strength training. And up to 5 days a week, so 3 days a week minimum.
What does strength training do for people?
Well, anyone at risk for osteoporosis, it helps build bone strength, it helps increase metabolic function. You know, there are a number of benefits to strength training.
Back to chronic fatigue syndrome. After this initial test, that is the end of the exercise life for the patient?
Absolutely not. What it does is it allows them to do two things. The beauty of the testing is it allows me to tell them what their magic number is, and the magic number is the heart rate at the threshold, which will allow them to pace their daily activities under that threshold. The problem for the CFS-ME patient is they often are exceeding that threshold doing everyday tasks. So whereas an athlete has to exercise fairly hard, or a healthy individual has to exercise fairly hard to exceed that threshold, showering often exceeds the threshold, grocery shopping and other daily activities.
Do you have any recommendation for how to measure this besides heart rate?
That is the only way.
And what is the optimum heart rate?
To be under your heart rate at your threshold. So,
well, how do you define the threshold heart
now,
rate? What is the threshold?
Well, the threshold...
It's a movable feast, isn't it?
No. In healthy individuals, it's dead on. In individuals with heart disease and lung disease and HIV, you measure the anaerobic threshold and it is stable from day to day. Now, with exercise, you can improve the threshold. With CFS patients, there is that day-to-day variability. We go for the lower one.
Anaerobic threshold is the rate of oxygen consumed?
No, it's the rate, it's the point at which you shift from aerobic metabolism, which means using oxygen to produce energy, which is tremendously efficient, provides lots of energy currency. It's the point at which you switch over to anaerobic metabolism, where the body doesn't require oxygen to produce energy, but energy production is much less efficient. So if you go into anaerobic metabolism early, you can't sustain work. You can't sustain activity. For athletes that exceed their threshold, they can't sustain activity. They have to stop and rest. And the only way to pay back the debt that's created, the oxygen debt that's created when you exceed that threshold, is through rest.
With horses, we make them walk slowly.
And there you go.
So that they can keep some oxygen.
You know, they do this testing with horses, believe it or not.
Well, breathing is very important to horses. They have these enormous lungs that are connected to the front legs. Mm-hmm. And you can't run a horse and stop it because it will windbreak, a membrane breaks. It's trying to get oxygen and it can't. Back to the CFS patient. Do you have a website where people can look up this?
We do. At the University of the Pacific, we're the Pacific Fatigue Lab. The simple version is go.pacific.edu/PFL.
That's simple?
Yes.
We'll put it up on the screen. We will make it simple. Staci, it's a joy to talk to you, and what an interesting part of science. And good luck to you. I think it's so valuable if people can at least get the Social Security disability benefit that they're entitled to when they're stricken with this ghastly disease.
You know, every patient thanks me for doing this to them. And I know that's an irony, because it does cause symptom flare-up and exacerbation. but they're supremely grateful for having their disability
This is
benefit.
extremely interesting. Thank you so very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
If you would like to sponsor MECFS Alert, please contact us at mecfsalert@gmail.com. Help us to help you.